Hi, and welcome to another episode of On the Payroll, my podcast about project management, leadership, Salesforce, delivering great projects with great teams, and the lessons that we can get from implementations, good and bad. And in today's episode, I get an opportunity to get to know Steph Stylianou much better. The reason why I'm like this is because even though we worked together at Make Positive for a while, we didn't really get a chance to get to know each other, and that's how consulting is. Sometimes you get the team that you get and you head down with your team, and then after that it's next project. You socialize with the team that you're with at that moment, and then you move on. And sometimes there are great people in the company and your path just doesn't really cross just because of the projects that you've been on, and Steph was one of them. And she's since moved on to Salesforce, where she works as a solutions engineer. So I really enjoyed having this opportunity to just get to know her a little bit better and how she made the decisions that moved her from Cyprus to London working for Salesforce. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Hello, Steph. Welcome to my podcast on the payroll. Thank you so much for making the time to come and talk to me today. How are you feeling?
Hi, Pei. I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm quite excited to have you here. We have worked in the same company for a few years, and I was just reflecting that we didn't get the opportunity to work with each other. So this is a great chance for me to learn a little bit more about you. I'm actually quite interested. So can I begin by asking you to tell us the story of your journey and how you got to where you are today, which is as a principal solutions engineer at Salesforce? But feel free to start wherever you feel comfortable.
Yeah, sure. It's actually, I think, a little bit different, maybe. I started in the UK, so I'm originally from Cyprus, and I did a mathematics degree in the UK. And it's interesting when you do degrees like that, like STEM degrees, everyone encourages you to do them. But it's interesting because when you finish, it's like, what do I do now? You know, like there's the natural path from a degree like that is to go into teaching or lecturing or stay in academia, things like that. There is no natural next step that you can follow. You know, there's a lot of people studying accountancy, and there's a career path there, or, you know, going to law. Again, there's a natural career path. I think there's certain degrees that don't have that natural progression. I thought I wanted to stay in academia for a bit. So instead of committing to a 3-year PhD, I decided to go down the master's route and see if I enjoy kind of the research and things like that. So I went into occupational psychology. Again, very different. And I decided that I don't actually like academia. The idea of spending 3 years studying literature and like studying people was not exactly what kind of gave me the energy. I kind of wanted to get into work as soon as possible. I did move back to Cyprus for a bit, for a couple of years, and the job market there at the time was very difficult. So it was in the middle of an economic crisis. There were not very many kind of jobs around. The jobs that were available, you know, had a lot of demand. So I struggled a lot to find work. I ended up kind of falling into tech. My dad was into tech. He kind of suggested it as a path for me. And I became a business intelligence consultant. I was implementing SAP Business Objects at the time. It was interesting, but again, probably not for me sitting down and creating reports all day, every day. I enjoy spending time with customers, understanding their process and things like that. So my company back at Cyprus decided that they wanted to maybe start thinking about expanding into Salesforce, and they wanted people to kind of get certified, and I put my hand up. And that's kind of what led me to where I am, I very quickly decided that, if I want the future kind of to progress fast, if I want to grow my career in a meaningful way, I probably can't do that in Cyprus where I was. I always enjoyed the UK. I knew the language. So I kind of moved back and I found a job in London for a consultancy and really started kind of to get my battle scars in terms of project implementation as a functional consultant. And that's eventually how I ended up at the company where we work together. Progressing through that path, the implementation consultant path was really interesting. It was a lot of work to kind of understand the product, understand the best practice, make sure you're saying the right things, you're having the right advisory approach, the right consultancy approach with your different customers, sensing, responding to what they like and how they react. And eventually, I kind of developed into a solution architect, and then I progressed into that role. Fast forward to kind of a big project where I learned a lot, I stressed a lot, and probably burned out a little bit. I decided that maybe kind of the delivery approach and proceeding down that path would really burn me out if I continuously do that. And I eventually decided that, I don't think it's sustainable for me personally in the long term. And that's when I kind of moved into the pre-sales role, which encompassed all of the things that I really enjoyed doing, the customer interaction, the helping them to understand the vision, helping them kind of visualize and understand the business value and actually guide them down a direction, and help them think differently. And it had less of the stuff that I didn't enjoy, like arguing about picklist values and constantly kind of changing small things, spending a lot of time with the customer and then translating it to a wider team and, just spending a lot of time in the detail. I prefer kind of the strategy. I prefer the vision. I do think I am a detail person, but I don't like spending my entire life in the detail. So I found that this pre-sales role, the solution engineering role, was a much, much better fit in terms of my work-life balance and in terms of kind of my overall job satisfaction as well.
Wow.
And that's why we're here.
It sounds like quite kind of when you tell the story and I'm listening to it, it sounds very, yes, that seems to be the logical next step. And I can see why you've done it. Has it always been this way in terms of your decision making? Did you always feel confident in that's the path I want to take? I don't want to do this, I want to do that. Or have there been moments where you think, I don't know what to do, A or B?
That's a very good question, because I have a personal coach to help me with my career. And we were discussing exactly this topic this week, actually. And I think up to now, it has been the logical next step. And it was very clear in my head in terms of where I want to go and what I want to do next. And I think now I'm at a point in my career where it's not about the natural next step. It's about what's my direction for the next kind of 5 or 10 years. And I need to be more purposeful about what I'm doing and kind of decide, where do I get my energy from? What do I enjoy doing? Where do I want to be? And kind of identify my path and how I want to get there. So I think up to now, yes, it was very instinctive and it was very, this is the logical next thing. But now it's time to probably switch approaches and think a little bit more long-term and where I want to get to and how I'm going to get there.
Amazing. So let me ask, how long have you had your coach for?
We probably started in kind of in November or October last year. So not very long. Yeah.
What made you decide you needed a coach?
The uncertainty about what I want to do, I think, because I've always had, or almost always, if we exclude the after university, very stressful years. If we exclude that, I think I always kind of had a good direction in my head of where I want to go. And now it's getting to the point, where I'm very close to the top of kind of the individual contributor path within my role. So it's time to kind of just start thinking a little bit more big picture and just start making different decisions. So that's why I engaged a coach to kind of help me structure my thoughts and help me form kind of this approach of not even the plan, but how do I decide on the plan, if that makes sense.
That's really good though, because a lot of the people that I speak to within the ecosystem view Salesforce as the end goal. That's where I want to work, because it's an amazing company for many, many reasons. The leadership's quite inspiring, the things that they're doing, you just want to be part of that. And so you bring up a very interesting point where now that you're there, and you've been there for 3 years now, so for you, you have, I guess, to many people, oh, I'm so sorry. Sorry, that was my son trying to call me. And I hung up on him. I hope he's not in trouble.
Pick up the call.
I think he will call back. I think it is the I left something at home call, as opposed to there's a UFO crashing in the school, you need to come pick me up right now. I don't think it's that. So you being there now, I guess it's the next step. So for people who are listening and they think, oh, I want to work at Salesforce, that's my dream job. When I get there, I guess the first time I get the offer letter, I'm going to be absolutely excited. I'm going to tell everyone I have one goal in the Olympics and I've achieved everything. And then what next? After a while, I guess. Can you share with me? I know you're working this through with your coach, but it'd be great to just get some insight as to your thinking process. You've got there now, and what's been your journey since when you first joined Salesforce to where you are today, where you're thinking, I'm at the top of my individual contributor role? What are the options in front of me?
So I think there's a distinction based on what you said between the dream job and the dream company. So I think Salesforce is a dream company, but in terms of dream jobs, that changes, and that's going to change for every person as they're progressing through their career, And Salesforce is an amazing company, but it's also a company of 75,000 employees. It's massive, and it's good, it's a growing company constantly, but it does mean that identifying kind of all the different options can become a task in itself. If you're in a small company or a smaller company of 100 employees, you know what everyone is doing, and oh, that's an aspirational person, I want to be them. How do I become them? And there's a path that forms, and that's a lot easier. If you're in a company like Salesforce, you have so many different directions that you can go, areas of the business that you might choose to grow into. And, all of the paths are open, which is a great thing because you can explore and you can do all those different things, but it can also get overwhelming around, what should I do? What is the right choice? What is the right thing for me? And I mean, it depends on the person. Some people just try, and they don't mind kind of actually, no, I'm going to try something else and things like that. But there's also kind of, and I think I'm more in that area where I want to go with as much information as possible, so that I give myself, the best probability of success. And I know that the onboarding process can be quite long and things like that. So I don't want to waste anyone's time, not myself, not my colleagues. So I want to make sure that I'm choosing the right thing. When I came into Salesforce, I came in as a lead solution engineer. And again, there was a natural next step. I wanted to get to principal. And there was a process. There's like promotion processes, there are panels that we have to go through. We need to make sure that we're demonstrating the right skill set. We are demonstrating the right, leadership characteristics. We're respected. We're multiplying, our impact on the wider team. And now, where I am now, there's, within solution engineering, there's multiple paths. Outside of solution engineering, there's multiple paths. So it's more about the way that I'm going about thinking about it. And what my coach kind of advised me to think about is which areas do I love, which was similar to what I did when I moved from implementation to pre-sales. What do I love? I love spending time with customers. I like understanding my industry. So I work in high tech, which is a great industry to be in because, Salesforce is kind of one of the golden standards. So I get to speak to my customers about what Salesforce does. So you have kind of the industry, maybe where does the customer, which areas of my job am I not willing to let go of, and which roles will provide me, with that ability to speak to customers, understand the industry deeper, be a thought leader in that area, while at the same time progressing. So there is still kind of the option to proceed down the individual contributor path. There's the distinguished role as an example. But again, is that the right thing? Or is it now the perfect time to actually maybe start thinking about something else in an area where, again, there's good growth for me from a personal perspective as well, where I can get more out of it and understand different things that maybe I've never explored before.
Thank you. Just going to pause for a moment. Thank you for that explanation, and also giving the difference, identifying the difference between the dream job and dream company. So just extending that slightly further, what are the options you have in front of you that that is open, but that you're still trying to make a decision on?
I think I'm still trying to figure that out. Again, there's the logical thing, there's the logical next step, and the two kind of clear options of going down maybe the distinguished path, or what a lot of people some people tend to choose, which is going down the management path within the solution engineering. And then there's kind of a bunch of everything else as well, right? So I'm not very close in terms of determining what that next step might be at this stage. I'm gonna get there. I'm giving myself the time and the space to figure that out, and I'm trying not to put pressure because I think it's important to just try and get it right. So yeah, don't know.
So you come across as someone who's quite cautious in the way you approach things. Are you like that in the other areas of your life as well?
I wouldn't say I am actually cautious. I wouldn't self-identify as that. I mean, when I moved to the UK, the way that I kind of made that decision, I think I knew what I wanted, but when I made that decision, I remember being like, I'm going to flip a coin, and it's not about the act. It's about knowing what you want while you're waiting for the result, or while you're kind of about to see the result. I think it's not that I'm cautious. I think it's because that I usually do know what I want. So when I don't know what I want, I'm getting a little bit paralyzed or overwhelmed. And then I'm struggling to kind of make a decision because I don't know what I want. I'm in the process of purchasing a flat right now. And again, it was a very quick decision. So yeah, I jump out of planes for fun. I don't really identify as a cautious person. But yeah, it is. I think it's when I'm unclear, when there's uncertainty, that I get cautious. And it was the same probably in my implementation kind of experience, when there was a lot of uncertainty, when there was a lot of unknowns, I always wanted to take a step back and think about things, and kind of determine things. Whereas if everything is smooth, you know what to do next. So I think I pivot between the two, and it's always when it's not instinctive and it needs kind of thought that I try and take a step back.
Okay, so I'm just going to separate slightly. Holidays, do you plan it to the nth degree, or do you just get a ticket somewhere and see what happens next?
So before the pandemic, I was the type of person that at the beginning of the year knew where they were going to spend every day of holiday, but that was it. So yes, I know I want to spend like 2 weeks in Cyprus in the summer seeing my family. I want to spend X weeks skydiving. I want to do this, I want to do that. But then if I'm going into a new country, I'm probably going to get on a plane, get there, and then be like, oh, now what? You know? So it's like it's kind of, I know sometimes the destination and I know what I want to do. And then it's kind of, well, I think with holidays as well, it's important to experience it and see where you go. I don't like the itinerary stuff because then you're stuck in, oh, I need to be there at that time and I need to be there at that time. And you don't get to kind of just take it all in and allow the city or the place to kind of take you somewhere. So yeah, I'm not a big planner, I think, when it comes to holidays and stuff like that.
But there's still uncertainty in there because you don't know what's going to happen. And so you're like a big bunch of contradictions in my head. Not in a bad way, but so earlier on you said, uncertainty would paralyze you, but when it comes to holidays, it's something that you embrace with both hands open. But I like that. I think I'm still trying to get to know you a little bit in terms of the kind of person you are. So here's a question. Would you, if an opportunity came up in a part of the world that you've never been, would you say yes?
It depends if it's the right opportunity. Yeah. If it excites me and I want to do it, I don't see why not. It depends on the circumstances, if it's something that it is exciting and I want to do it, I don't think I would hesitate for whatever reason. But it needs to be the right thing, for sure.
I guess I already knew the answer because you came over to England and, making new friends and starting a new job. I guess that's something that you just took in your stride, and I can see that your next step will be something that you will not have done on a whim. You do sound like somebody who does think about stuff and to a certain extent do plan some. So that's really interesting. Right, I'm just going to take you backwards slightly when you were doing projects, because that's the world that I live in terms of consulting and projects. Tell me about your favorite project. Do you have one or more than one?
I think I do have kind of a project that I would classify as kind of my favorite one. And I would say that it's mainly because it was kind of probably the only time I can remember that, things went on budget, on time, to plan, and it's probably like out of my project experience, like the one time when it went just perfect and nothing was to worry about, and it was kind of just nice. It's nice and a smooth experience. And it just stayed with me because that became the goal, that became the kind of, we do this again. So yeah, I think that was probably my favorite one. It was with a manufacturing company, like a furniture manufacturer. And yeah, they knew what they were trying to achieve. They were not trying to overstretch, what they were doing. It was a very specific, this is what we need, and we understand it, and we know what we want. And there was not a lot of, and it was a small organization, which made, the decision-making process fast and smooth. And yeah, it was a nice experience.
Okay. So if I can just summarize that slightly, it sounds like it was a good project because the client knew what they wanted. They were able to make decisions quickly based on information and recommendations that you provided. Sounds like they had more mature project management approach and understood about change. So tell me about some of the character building projects that had gone wrong, where these principles were not applied? How, tell me about some of those.
I think when a project is gonna go wrong, you sometimes know from the very beginning, from as soon as you get, that statement of work, and it's like, someone has done something here. Someone has oversold something or undersold something, So yeah, it was probably the one that springs to mind the most is probably my last one. And I remember kind of we first had kind of like a starting phase, where we did a lot of define and design, and then the customer then wanted to kind of pause for a bit. They re-engaged about 6 months later, right? So we came back to, but what has happened since? What has changed in the past 6 months? Are you sure that the decisions that you made then are still the decisions that you want today? So suddenly we had a very quick sprint zero, like a couple of weeks, to kind of just remind ourselves of what happened 6 months ago, read through everything, be able to kind of confirm that all of those things were right, and also set ourselves up for the DevOps approaches, provision all the users and things like that in 2 weeks. And I remember at that time kind of debating that with the kind of the sales team, the program management team, and kind of everyone else within the project. And no, it has to be like that. But why? Right? Like that's kind of that was from the beginning. I was like, that if we take the time now to get it right, to make sure that we are on the right track, we're going to save a lot of time down the line of refactoring, redoing things and working through them again and again. So it's kind of from the very start when something is going to go slightly wrong, and that's exactly what happened. But no, that's not the case anymore. That works in a different way now. No, we don't want to do it like that. We don't want to do it like this. Every user story had to be reworked, very long, painful sessions, spending a day reworking all the user stories again on a Friday when the sprint was starting on a Monday. It was just, we didn't manage to catch up for months. We didn't manage to kind of get it on track for almost the entirety of phase one. It was just constant, go back, fix things. There's not enough resources, not enough capacity, like trying to just get it over the line constantly.
So was this the internal team who said, don't take the time to confirm? It wasn't the client who made that decision?
It was probably a combined decision at that point.
Right.
I'm not 100% kind of sure of the decision-making process. Mm-hmm. I just believe that the way that the internal team re-engaged was, we don't need to rework anything. We can just start, and that was kind of part of the selling point, I believe, which then kind of led to 6 months of just overtime and overworking at least the design team, the team that was trying to figure out what's the design, what's the requirement. So the architects, we were just, trying to get something in the hands of the developers, in the hands of the consultants, to be able to kind of build something and prove value to the customer. It was definitely a character building project. That's a good way to frame it.
Okay, so basically it is it's kind of unique in that you had that pause, it's 6 months pause. I also had a project that was quite similar, and in 6 months lots of things can happen. Stakeholders can change, agendas, priorities change, both on client side and also on the consulting side, and it's always a good idea to take a restock. Is it a straight pick up and go, or do we have to review and redesign some stuff so that we start on the right foot in the way that you've suggested? And I think also probably a combination of factors of expectation setting, maybe the sales team during the renegotiation, because sometimes they pause because they want to disengage, and then it's a matter of trying to recover, and promises might be made that makes it just so much more challenging. So thank you for sharing that. Has there been any projects that you've worked on that has changed you as a person? So I know already you've talked about how you've decided that this job is not for you and you were going to burn out if you carried on continuing down that path. Is there anything, other project that's like that made you change your point of view about leadership or human behavior or yourself, how you view yourself, that you haven't shared so far?
I actually think my first probably project in the UK was an interesting one in that way, because it changed me as a consultant. I remember kind of the customer wanted a bunch of different options about something they were trying to achieve. And I mean, I was so green, right? I was like brand new. I wanted to please. I kind of came up with kind of 3 or 4 different approaches that we could take. I ratified, the designs with more senior people in the team, architects, people like that. And then I went back to play it back to the customer. And the call did not go well. So as I was presenting the options, about kind of like 5 or 10 minutes through, they stopped me. And there was a bit of like raising the voice type of situation. And they go to me, you have to provide a recommendation. We're paying for a recommendation, not just for you to present a bunch of options, like you're consulting, give a recommendation. And I think that defined me as a consultant from that point. From that point, I completely changed my approach. And I was like, they're right, they are paying for, this is best practice, and this is what you should be doing. Now, if you don't want to do that for whatever reason, because it's expensive, or it doesn't do exactly what you want, and you can't sacrifice your requirement, these are all the other options, right? In order of what's worse from like a system perspective. But this is what we're telling you should be doing, and kind of keep that in mind, right? So there's also kind of that fallback that if we've gone for the very custom approach, the very complicated approach, that we can always come back to standard if we need to. So if something happens and they're not happy with that and they change their minds, there's always and this is the best practice. So I have believed that from that point on, I switched my approach a lot, and I became more consultative. I became more kind of advisory in how I operate with customers. And I always kind of lead with, this is what I want you to do. This is what I am recommending, but this is also kind of available to you. Now, I do think that has served me well over the years, definitely. But I do think now it's also time to start recognizing that depending on where people are, because I kind of use this approach for everything, for helping my mentees, for helping kind of my team. I've kind of used this type of approach. And I think at least internally, and when I'm growing and I'm helping my team kind of think about things, I'm decided that now it's time to switch to a coaching style and allow people to get there, and depending on kind of how senior they are, allow them to get there themselves. Rather than trying to kind of just telling them and dictating, this is what it is. So I think, again, it served me very well up to now, but now it might be time again to kind of just switch things around and try a different style.
I think what you described as a change in context. One is a client, and the other one is coaching. whereby you want to encourage people to think about their own options and their own recommendations. I'm sure your coach wouldn't be saying you should go for option B, because in
I would
the
really
long
love for someone to just tell me though.
but to that point though, there's a certain level of accountability. If someone tells you what to do and it goes wrong, sometimes there's a sense that I can blame that person. The partner told me that we should go down the config path, and now look at, we're hitting the CPU limits, and if we did do code, that would be much better. But obviously the recommendation is, you got to maintain, blah blah blah. But there is a sense of, I'm paying you to tell me what to do so that I can blame you when things go wrong, which is, it does happen, but it shouldn't. In terms of coaching, when you're talking about internal team, you really want them to own their outcome. So your flip in style is quite context driven, to be honest. So that sounds the right thing to do. I have another question, which is in terms of you being part of a team, project team, setting the project aside, what kind of teams work best? The teams that you've worked in, what are the makeup of the people and the project manager or the leadership that makes you think this is an amazing team to work in, regardless of how character building project that we're on? But with these people by my side, it's just, we can do anything. Talk to me about your feelings around what makes a high performing team.
I think it's the ability for everyone to kind of just show what they're good at and grow. If people start get kind of dictated 100%, oh, this is your role, this is what you need to be doing, and there's no ability for them to kind of just speak up and kind of say, oh, I have this idea or I have this opinion and things like that, then I think it starts kind of stalling. So it's a team that people are allowed to kind of be creative. It needs to have enough diversity, so not everyone is of exactly the same background. So and I mean kind of even professional background, right? If you get a bunch of functional consultants and ask them to design a solution, they're all going to come up with configuration approaches, or most of them are going to come up with configuration approaches. And it becomes an echo chamber, right? So you need people with different backgrounds so that you can start saying, well, actually, we need to think about that. We didn't think about that initially. Or we need to think about this. We haven't thought about that either. So it's important to kind of just have that diverse experience to allow kind of really the best to kind of come out of that, At the same time, it does depend. So if it's a really big team, not everyone can constantly be inputting, in everything. So you decide who's relevant to be in conversations, who's not relevant to be in conversations, because you have to. So it varies. It's good when, what I found really works really well is when there's that funnel system, so where the PM decides what's relevant for the team to know and what's noise, so not everything comes through, because that becomes kind of, oh, the customer's complaining about this and this and this and this. Oh my God, what are we going to do, But some of that might just be noise, and some of it might be useful to know. So if the project manager or program managers decide, what information goes to the implementation team, I think that's a productive way of working. And then the same downwards, the architects then choose what's noise for, the consultants to know and what's not. And again, you progress in that way. So if, there's a concern about the velocity of the speed of the team, maybe you get the different work streams and you speak to them about, why are we stalling? Is maybe the DevOps that's holding us back? What is it? So you can work through the problem. But if it's kind of something that's really not relevant for them to know, then not everyone needs to be stressed in a team 100% of the time, you can protect and ring fence certain people so that they can do their best work. So yeah, a lot of kind of different things can happen, I think, to make a team more productive and more high performing. And it's going to be different depending on the individuals that you have in that team.
This segues very nicely into the next question that I have, which is around, so you've already highlighted one thing that project managers or program managers can do is to identify what's noise and what's important to focus on. So in your experience throughout all the places that you've worked in, what other things do, okay, so let's step back. So one of the things that I believe is the PM is we have direct impact on the team's day-to-day happiness in how we manage things. But I'd like to hear it from your point of view, apart from the sifting of noise and relevant things for the team, what other aspects or traits that a project manager or the leader of your team should have in order to make sure that that you like working with somebody like that? What are the things that a PM needs to have for you to like working with that person?
I mean, the two, I think, common ones is going to be the scope management. So making sure that we're not constantly dealing with scope creep, and the change management piece. So if, we've already developed something, delivered something, and now we need to change it because business changed, that needs to be kind of dealt with in an appropriate way, because otherwise, there's just more stuff to do and less time to do it. So I think that's just hopefully that's just part of the job description. Other things though that would make a difference is just listening to, what worries the team, because those are the risks. Those are the project risks usually, so if the team is saying and is highlighting, I'm worried about this, this, and this, and I think, that could put the project at risk, there needs to be some active listening there without kind of minimizing their concerns in any way. And then that needs to be kind of consumed and communicated in an appropriate way. When that does get communicated to the customer, that feedback needs to come back to the team. So that, because if you're my project manager and I'm telling you something and you kind of minimize me, and then you do communicate it to the customer, but you never tell me that you did, I think you're not doing your job, So, and then that creates frustration that's unnecessary, because you have been doing what I'm expecting, but I don't know that you have, right? So then I keep telling you the same thing, which frustrates you because you've told me already, stop telling me, right? But I don't know you're doing anything with it. So it's about kind of that constant communication, exchange of information, and making sure that it's not kind of just, someone feeling like, oh, I'm just saying it and it's like I'm speaking to a wall, right? Nothing is going through. The other big thing I think that I found frustrating was sometimes the change of project management, because if for whatever reason kind of a project manager leaves, maybe the customer doesn't agree with them or whatever, they've left the company or whatever might happen, that transition really needs to be managed closely. What happens sometimes, and that's not everywhere, but what happens sometimes is that there's a gap between the old project manager and the new project manager. The burden is going to go on the team. That role needs to be filled, right? And then suddenly things are going to fall through the cracks. It's going to be more scope creep because I don't have time to deal with arguing. I need to just do my work. So there's going to be more scope creep. It creates a precedent that then cannot be like the new PM now has to fight, right? We don't do that anymore, or whatever. So actually that transition where there is a change in project management, I think there needs to be a very good buffer between the old project manager and the new project manager to make sure that the disruption to the project, not just the team, is minimized as much as possible. Because again, I've had projects that had like 4 PM changes, in 2 years. That was painful. That was very painful.
So that leads me to my next question, which is around style. So you had one project where the client is the same, and you've got 4 different project managers. Now, taking aside the transition period and the pain associated with moving from one to the other, which of those 4 handled it best? So one of the things that I get asked to do a lot in my role is to pick up project that's in recovery mode sometimes, and I've got to pick up something from scratch and try and figure out what everything, what the lay of the land is, what the vibe is, and how the energy is like, and where things went wrong, etc. So of the 4 that you've had, how did those who you felt managed it best, what did they do that was different from the others who didn't manage it quite as well?
I think it was the ones that stopped for a second to take stock. So the ones that, recognize that, look, I don't know this project. I'm new to it. Tell me what's going on. Tell me what's wrong. Tell me what worked. Tell me what didn't work, and collaborated with the team and actually spent like a little bit of time just listening and figuring out how it needs to be different. Because, if something has not been going the right way, especially if the last PM was asked to kind of maybe leave the project, why, and actually speak to the team to understand it. I don't think like it's necessary, that in every project, some project managers are more, I want to be like a friend to all the consultants, or I want to be, like coaching them, or I want to be this, or I want to be that. That it depends on the person. Some people are going to want to be coached a little bit more, some people are not. I don't think it's about that. I think it's about kind of just recognizing that, yeah, this is good, the start, stop, continue model. We're going to start doing this, we're going to stop doing this, and then we're going to continue doing this, and kind of just agreeing this way of working with the project team and with the customer as well, to kind of just change something about the approach. Because a lot of people are coming into a project, they're picking up the work that the last project manager was doing, and they end up kind of just carrying on in the same trajectory, right? Whereas I think it's important to kind of just recognize that some things might need to change, then we might need to kind of switch the approach, and it's an opportunity to do so because it's a different person. So people are just having that expectation that something is going to be different this time. So I think that opportunity should be embraced, not kind of ignored.
So just one last question about that particular project. Was there a reason why there were 4 different PMs? Was it just a personality clash? Or was it just a project that was one of those tricky, complex ones where politics was part of the whole situation? I'm just trying to get a sense of how did you get 4 in 2 years?
I think it was a combination of things. Sometimes it was a personality clash. Sometimes it was a lack of recognition that the project manager was bringing. Sometimes it was lack of maybe expected value being delivered for the entire kind of project. And it was politics, because then it would either be the project team or it would be the customer. It's also things like it was maybe a contractor that maybe wanted to move on. It was genuinely just a perfect storm of circumstances, to be honest. I don't think it was specifically like any one thing. Probably every PM there was a different reason for why they had to exit. But it's just interesting, right? Like that it all fell on one. It's also the fact that people were not motivated enough to stick with it, I think. It's kind of, if things are going wrong, if you have to deal with politics, like you kind of mentioned all the time, then if you have a different opportunity to go and do something else, you might take that because it will be easier, or because you're not seeing kind of anything significant changing anytime soon. So it was a little bit of everything.
Oh, I can.
Doesn't help. It doesn't help your answer.
No. I think it does, but the only sense I can get out of it was that must be terribly frustrating for the project team to have to learn to work with so many different people, and not ideal, and having to carry the burden in between during a transition. So I won't be very mindful of your time. Thank you again, Steph, for spending time. This has been really fascinating to get to know you both on a personal level and the professional journey you've taken. I'm quite glad to see you've got to the Salesforce mothership, as so many people say. Whatever path you choose to take, I'm sure it's going to be exciting because of how you look at things and how you approach things. And also, thank you for the time in sharing your experience, because inside all of that, there are so many things I can draw on in terms of learnings other people could take on board in their career within the ecosystem. So I do appreciate your time. Thank you, Steph.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.